Something happened in Cleveland this week that I genuinely don't think the mainstream football conversation has caught up to yet. And I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm saying it because I watched the footage, I read the reports, and I went back through the details a second time. And when you stack everything together, what you're left with is something that doesn't happen very often in May. You're left with a moment where the carefully managed illusion of an open competition stopped being an illusion and started becoming an actual football story. Let me be direct about what we're dealing with. Shedeur Sanders walked onto that practice field during a Cleveland Browns OTA session, and what followed wasn't just a promising day from a rookie learning the system. It was the kind of performance that made the people inside that building, veterans of this industry, scouts and executives who've spent their entire careers watching quarterbacks throw footballs, go back and watch the tape a second time. Not because something went wrong, because something went right in a way they weren't fully prepared for. That detail right there, that instinct to rewind and verify, is the whole story, and I want to take you through exactly why. 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 7 completions out of 15 attempts. I already know what you're thinking. 7 for 15 doesn't exactly scream historic, but you're missing the context of what those 15 throws actually were. OTA sessions in late May aren't built around safe, padded, easy reps designed to protect a quarterback's confidence. They're built around vertical passing concepts, tight windows, throws that accelerate the decision-making process and force a passer to commit before the situation fully resolves. The entire purpose is to expose, to find the moments where a quarterback hesitates too long, drifts in his reads, or forces throws into coverage because he doesn't trust what he's seeing. 3 touchdowns and 0 turnovers inside that environment isn't a coincidence. That's a player who processes the game faster than the environment is designed to punish him for. The throw that I keep coming back to, the one that's been circulating in every conversation I've had about this, is the touchdown to Isaiah Bond. You need to slow it down to fully appreciate what Shedeur actually did on that play. Bond is still in his route. He hasn't finished his break, the separation window hasn't fully opened, and the ball is already gone. It's already in the air, already committed to a specific spot on the field that Bond is still in the process of arriving at. There's no hesitation, there's no second read, no additional confirmation. Shedeur processed the leverage the defender was playing, trusted the route concept, and pulled the trigger, while lesser quarterbacks were still deciding whether to pull the trigger at all. What you're watching in that moment is pure anticipation, the rarest and most unteachable element of playing quarterback at a high level. I want to expand on that point because I think people default to the wrong conversation when evaluating quarterbacks. Everyone talks about arm strength, the velocity discussion, how hard can he spin it, how far downfield can he drive it, and look, those things matter. I'm not going to pretend they don't. But velocity is trainable. Mechanics are coachable. What nobody in any film room anywhere has ever successfully installed into a quarterback who didn't already have it is the internal clock, the processing speed. That instinct to throw a football at a piece of empty grass and know, with complete certainty, that your receiver is going to arrive at the same spot the ball does, based entirely on your own read of the route structure and the defender's body angle. That's not something you build through drill work. A quarterback either has it or he doesn't. And what we watched on that Bond touchdown told you very clearly which category Shedeur Sanders belongs in. Then there was the connection with Jerry Jeudy, and this one impresses me for a completely different set of reasons. Judy's entire identity as a receiver is built on precision, sharp breaks, sudden directional changes, separation windows that exist for fractions of a second before they collapse. You can't just point a throw in Judy's general direction and hope timing takes care of itself. You have to read the defender's hip, identify the coverage leverage, and deliver the ball into a specific pocket of space that accounts for Judy's body position coming out of the cut, the closing speed of the defender, and however much real estate is still available before he runs out of room. That's not a throw you make by instinct alone. That's a throw that requires the full picture to come together in real time, and Shedeur put that ball exactly where it needed to be. A delivery Judy could absorb, secure, and still get both feet down cleanly. I watched the sideline reaction after that play. It wasn't the polite, obligatory applause you see on a routine practice rep. People were genuinely lit up. Professional coaches who have run that drill hundreds of times don't react that way to something ordinary. They react that way when something exceeds what they walked onto that field expecting to see. The third touchdown, the one to Cedric Tillman, brought a different detail to the surface, one that multiple people physically present that day specifically called out. The footwork on Shedeur's drop before the throw, and before you scroll past that as a minor technical footnote, I need you to understand why footwork is the one thing veteran evaluators zero in on above almost everything else. Footwork is the invisible foundation of the entire position. You can have elite vision and an elite arm, and both of those advantages get quietly eroded if your base is sloppy, if your feet are drifting under pressure, if you're not resetting cleanly between reads. Inconsistent footwork is how quarterbacks with genuinely elite physical tools still miss wide-open throws on velocity-driven attempts because the mechanics aren't holding together under real conditions. The fact that Shedeur's footwork remained clean under live evaluation reps, with competitive pressure building and real eyes watching every detail, is the thing that tells you those mechanics aren't just practice field polish, they're durable. And durability is what separates prospects from starters. Now I have to get into the part of this story that nobody inside the Cleveland organization is ready to say out loud yet, but that the numbers are starting to force into the open anyway. In that same practice session, Deshaun Watson went 9 for 17, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And before you try to close that gap and argue the numbers aren't meaningfully different, I want you to think about what football actually comes down to when you strip away all the supporting noise. Touchdowns and turnovers. That's the equation at the center of the whole game. Everything else, completion percentage, pressure rate, air yards, it's all contextual framing around those two numbers. Shedeur produced 3 scores and didn't surrender the ball once. Watson produced 2 scores and gave it away once. That difference isn't a footnote. That difference is the entire point. And then you have to layer in the context. Watson's contract is one of the most aggressive financial commitments in the history of NFL quarterback deals. Fully guaranteed money at a level that genuinely changed how teams around the league thought about what quarterback contracts could look like. The Browns didn't just sign Watson. They built an identity around him. They structured their roster to fit his strengths. They gave him years of runway to justify the investment. And now, on a Tuesday in late May, with no playoff pressure attached, no national spotlight, no high-stakes moment to explain away a rough outing, a rookie is outproducing him in a head-to-head evaluation on the same practice field. That's not a one-day anomaly. That's a pattern that's been quietly building, and this week it became impossible to look past it. But the single detail that tells me the most about where this competition genuinely stands right now isn't the stat line. It's the reps. Shedeur ran with the first-team offense that day. Take a second to think about what that actually means in practical terms. Coaching staffs don't hand first-team reps to a rookie quarterback during an active competition out of sympathy, or to create a storyline, or to send some message they're not ready to make official. That decision gets made deliberately by people who have been charting every single throw across every single practice session, who have been building a private internal evaluation that the public hasn't seen, and who have started forming a real opinion about which version of this quarterback room actually gives them the best football team. Rep distribution is where the internal evaluation leaks before anyone says anything on the record. The depth chart is managed. The press conference language is curated. But rep distribution reflects exactly what the coaching staff actually believes in that moment, regardless of what they're willing to admit publicly. Which brings me to Todd Monken, because what came out of his press conference following that practice was just as revealing as anything that happened between the hash marks. When a reporter pushed him directly about Shedeur's performance, Monken didn't pivot, didn't reach for the standard nothing to see here offseason non-answer that every coaching staff has ready for exactly that situation. He confirmed Shedeur had a strong outing. He confirmed both quarterbacks have been competing hard across the entire offseason stretch, and he confirmed that the staff has genuinely been rotating first-team reps between them throughout the program. This practice just happened to be the day Shedeur got the majority of those starter snaps. You can file that under coincidence if you want. I find it worth sitting with the fact that even while Monken was trying to manage the narrative, he ended up validating the exact thing everyone had been watching, that this competition is real, it's genuinely close, and that on the day it mattered most for outside eyes, the rookie was the one wearing the first-team jersey. There was another moment in that same press conference that deserves attention completely on its own, separate from the stat conversation. A reporter brought up the fact that Shedeur Sanders had reportedly requested a meeting with Monken, and that scheduling conflicts on Deion's end had prevented it from happening yet. For weeks, a meaningful segment of the football media treated that request as a punchline, a famous father inserting himself into his son's professional career in ways that supposedly crossed some professional line. Monken dismantled that framing completely. He said he respects Shedeur Sanders across every dimension, as a player who defined a generation, as a coach who built something genuinely impressive at Colorado, and as a father. He specifically said that Deion clearly did something right in how he raised Shedeur, because everything Shedeur has done since walking into that building has been work. Head down, no noise, just work. And then Monken went further. He said he was ready to meet whenever Deion's calendar opened, and he joked that if someone told him where Deion's next commercial was filming, he'd show up there himself. I want you to feel the weight of that answer, because Monken wasn't reading from a diplomatic script designed to diffuse a media situation. He separated his respect for Dion into three specific, distinct categories and volunteered it without being pressed into it. That is not how you talk about someone who irritates you. That is not how you talk about someone you're managing at arm's length because of external pressure. That's how you talk about someone whose track record you've genuinely internalized and hold in real regard. And when Monken connected that respect directly back to Shedeur's behavior inside the facility, noting specifically that Shedeur had already been in the building putting in work before most players had even shown up for the formal program, and that Monken had personally noticed. That wasn't diplomatic filler language. That was a head coach describing someone he's already started to trust. And then there's a small detail buried inside that same answer. The kind of thing that gets skimmed over in a recap but actually reveals more about a person's character than almost anything measurable. Monken mentioned, almost as an aside, that early in the process, Shedeur had given him a gift, a horse head, as a way of building a relationship with the man calling his offense before any of the football even started. It's an odd, funny detail, but I keep turning it over in my mind because of what it says beneath the surface. Shedeur Sanders came into an NFL building where his name carries enormous weight, where his father's reputation precedes every room he walks into, where some portion of that organization expected him to carry himself like someone who believes respect is simply owed to him. And instead of leaning on any of that or waiting for the room to come to him, he tried to build a genuine human connection with his offensive coordinator before a single snap was taken. That's not how entitled prospects operate. That's how people who understand that talent alone doesn't buy trust inside a professional building choose to carry themselves. There's also a layer to this story that lives below the visible surface of statistics and highlight reps, and it has everything to do with how a locker room reads and responds to what it's seeing. When a rookie starts consistently outperforming a veteran in direct evaluation, especially a veteran carrying the kind of financial and organizational commitment Watson carries, that shift doesn't stay contained to the quarterback room. It radiates. Receivers start trusting the arm that delivers the ball on time and on target. Offensive linemen respond to the timing and rhythm that's actually generating clean drives. Skill players take notice of who's finishing possessions and who's leaving points behind. That perception travels through a building faster than any official depth chart update ever could. And once it takes root, it becomes very difficult for an organization to roll it back without doing real damage to the chemistry they've spent months building. Shedeur isn't just winning individual practice reps right now. He's winning something more durable than that. He's winning the room's trust, one clean throw at a time. I'll be honest about the strongest pushback here because it deserves a direct response rather than getting waved away. The obvious counter-argument is that this is OTAs, no pads, no live pass rush. Quarterbacks with entirely average NFL careers have looked like generational talents in May, before training camp arrived and collapsed the whole illusion. That's a fair point, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But here's what specifically complicates that argument in this situation. The absence of pads doesn't explain first-team reps going to a rookie over a veteran with fully guaranteed money. Coaching trust doesn't get manufactured in a no-contact environment. The people making that rep distribution decision have been watching every single throw across every single practice day, and they decided that on the most visible day of the spring program, with reporters present, cameras rolling, the rookie was the one who had earned the right to run with the starters. That decision wasn't made casually, and no amount of Maya's meaningless framing fully explains it away. Dillon Gabriel is part of this quarterback room too, and I don't want to skip past him. He went 3 for 5 with a touchdown in that same session. Clean, efficient, nothing to be embarrassed by. But the volume of meaningful reps he received tells its own story about where the staff's focus is currently concentrated. The bulk of evaluative snaps were split between Shedeur and Watson. Gabriel worked in a supporting role. Fewer attempts, less organizational weight behind his snaps. That's not a commentary on anything he's done wrong. It's a reflection of where the real competitive energy inside this room is actually pointed. Here's where I land when I pull all of this together. A month ago, the conversation around Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland was centered on whether he could even crack the depth chart as a rookie, whether the Browns had any realistic path to moving on from the massive financial commitment they'd already made to Watson, whether this was just a feel-good draft story with no real competitive legs underneath it. That conversation has fundamentally changed. The question now isn't whether Shedeur can compete at this level. The question is whether the veteran with the guaranteed contract can hold him off. In practice, in the offensive coordinator's trust, and in the quiet internal standings that ultimately determine who takes the first snap of Week 1. I'm not going to tell you the decision has already been made, because it hasn't been announced and a lot of football remains to be played. But the distance between where this story stood a month ago and where it stands today is not small. And somewhere inside that Cleveland facility, I think a quiet but significant realization is starting to solidify. That the answer to a question this franchise has been searching for across several difficult years might have walked through their doors just a few months ago, wearing a number that nobody expected to matter this much, this fast.